Chapter 1. Blood on the Stairs. The morning of August 4, 1892 began like any other in the Borden household with the slow, deliberate ticking of the grandfather clock in the parlor, the distant clatter of the maid's breakfast preparations, and the faint, rhythmic creak of the stairs as Lizzie Borden descended, her slippered feet barely disturbing the polished wood. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and the faint, metallic tang of the August heat pressing against the windows. But by noon the house on 2nd Street would be drenched in something far more sinister than summer air. Lizzie moved through the halls with the quiet precision of a woman who had spent years perfecting the art of invisibility. At 32, she was neither beautiful nor plain, but there was something unsettling in the way her dark eyes flicked away from direct gaze, as if she were always calculating the distance between herself and the world. Her father, Andrew Borden, was a man of rigid habits. His breakfast at 6, his nap at noon, his ledgers always balanced to the penny. And yet, for all his precision, he had never noticed the way his daughter's hands sometimes trembled when she thought no one was looking. The house itself was a monument to his thrift. The wallpaper was faded, the carpets worn thin, but the silver was polished, the china displayed with meticulous care. It was a home that whispered of wealth without ever quite embracing it, a place where every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo the unspoken tensions between the Bordens. Andrew's second wife, Abby, was a woman of quiet endurance, her presence in the house a constant, acknowledged irritation to Lizzie. The two women moved around each other like shadows, their interactions measured in silences and half-glances. By the time the maid Bridget Sullivan had finished her chores and retreated to her room for a nap, the house had settled into its midday hush. The sun beat down on the shingled roof, turning the attic into an oven, the walls humming with the heat. Lizzie, restless, wandered into the dining room, where the morning's newspapers lay scattered across the table. The headlines spoke of labor strikes, of women's suffrage, of a world shifting beneath the feet of men like Andrew Borden. She traced, a finger over the ink, her mind elsewhere. Then footsteps, a slow, deliberate tread on the stairs, the kind of sound that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She turned, expecting to see Bridget, or perhaps her sister Emma, home from one of her long walks. But the figure that emerged from the shadows was neither. It was her father. Andrew Borden was a small man, but his presence filled the room. His face was pinched with age, his eyes sharp beneath bushy brows. He carried himself with the air of a man who had spent a lifetime counting every penny and every slight. He nodded at Lizzie, a curt acknowledgment, before moving toward the parlor, where he settled into his favorite chair. The house groaned around them, the floorboards settling, the walls whispering. Lizzie lingered in the doorway, watching him. There was something in his posture too relaxed, too vulnerable, that made her stomach twist. She had spent years studying him, learning the rhythms of his moods, the way his temper flared when crossed. But today he seemed different, older, frailer. And then a sound. Not from the house, not from the street, but from somewhere inside her own skull, a voice that hissed now. She turned, her skirts swirling around her, and vanished into the kitchen. The axe was kept in the cellar, its blade dull with disuse. But Lizzie knew how to sharpen it. She had watched the stable hands do it 100 times. The rhythmic scrape of steel against stone, the way the edge caught the light when it was done. Her hands were steady as she worked, her breath even. The house above her was silent, the only sound the distant ticking of the clock, counting down the seconds. When she was finished, she climbed the stairs, the axe heavy in her grip. The parlor door was ajar. Inside, her father sat, his head tilted back, his eyes closed. The afternoon light slanted across his face, turning his skin to wax. She raised the axe. The first blow was clean, the second misser. The third. By the time she was done, the floor was slick with blood, the walls splattered in crimson arcs. The axe clattered to the ground, and she stood there panting, her hands shaking now, her dress stained beyond saving. She had done it. And yet, as she turned to leave, she heard another sound, a gasp, a stumble, a voice, weak and trembling. Lizzie, Abby Borden, stood in the doorway, her face ashen, her hands pressed to her throat. She had seen Liz's breath call. The axe was still on the floor. And the blood of God, the blood was everywhere. The trial would come later, the newspapers, the spectators, the endless questions. But in that moment, as the sun dipped low over Fall River, there was only the weight of the axe in her hands, the sticky warmth of blood on her skin, and the terrible, unshakable knowledge that nothing would ever be the same. The first chapter of the tragedy had been written, and the ink was red.